he actually said, actually you can. It's just the limitations of your mind that's doing that. So I'm like, okay, fine. Well, please, sir, come up to the side of the train here and demonstrate that gravity doesn't work, please. And he said, well, my mind's not capable of that. And I responded, and mine is? And he was like, well, no. So why have you just claimed that I can force gravity not to work by sheer willpower? And then like other people were cutting in with more. I was accused again of evading it because I couldn't answer the question, do I have freedom? Freedom to do what? Freedom to speak to other passengers in a train carriage? Yes. Freedom to, just, go up to a woman and say a couple of things and she'll drop her panties and have sex with me? No. Because, there are certain bounds to our abilities and our personal freedoms, because our personal freedoms coincide with the personal freedoms of other people. We share space, we share different tastes and responsibilities and wills. So we don't have the freedom to impose upon the will of another human being, unless the situation is that we're being attacked by them and we need to defend ourselves. It's perfectly okay to disrupt the will of someone who's trying to kill you, and you need to defend yourself. But yeah, it was strange that they kept projecting. That's mainly what they were doing. They were using irrational arguments, projecting things like I wasn't answering questions, because I was using a lot of Socratic questioning, because this is one of the things that we discussed in the chapter meeting as well, that the Socratic method is so much more effective, because if you think about it, when you present someone with a piece of information, right off the bat, you're putting them in a position where they're starting to think, okay, do I agree with this or not? And if it fits with their current worldview, then they're more likely to believe it. If it doesn't, then they're far less likely, right? But when you ask someone a question, they are the ones generating the information, because a lot of people know what the actual approach of the Zeitgeist movement actually is, and they know what the optimal approach actually. They know what actually makes sense. It's just they've had indoctrination that's conditioned them to not think that way and think another way instead. And if they start thinking about the things that make sense, then there's fail-safes in place in terms of jingoisms and other status quo defences, like it's just the way it is and things like that. And it's like, the world really is not sustainable. That's the way it is. Never mind, won't change it then. So they clearly demonstrated a lot of these defence mechanisms, but I was trying to ask for clarification on things, and it just got blank stares, and it got to a point where they're like, you just don't answer any questions. You're just like a politician. So I was like, okay, well, what was the question? Right? So I knew what the only question left outstanding that I hadn't answered from them was how is this different from communism? So I had to ask them again, because I had to ask them what was the question, And they were just like, I don't know. They could not remember. They kept saying, "You're not answering questions." Okay, what was the question? They don't know what the question was. But the question was, how is it different from communism? But I asked them again. Please, someone, give me a definition of communism. And I was looking back and forth between about 10 different people, and no one was providing an answer. No one could define what they meant by communism. Because I dare say a lot of people will probably think, I'd say the buzzwords for the average understanding of communism: sharing, gulags, didn't work. Yeah, I'd say they're the buzzwords. Sharing was done before Stalin, maybe. Force, but yeah, you tend to get those sort of things. But they couldn't even define communism. They couldn't even define it, and that's concerning, because how can you bring it? Because it's always other people that bring communism to the discussion. I never, when I discuss science and sustainability, not once do I reference communism. I don't need to, because communism is shit. As far as I'm concerned, communism, as far as I'm concerned, is just as bad as capitalism. It's still based on money. It's still based on social stratification. It's still based on a human labour force. It's still based largely on the same kinds of thinking that we have now. It's not about a value, because this is one of the things that I think I really need to put more effort into making sure that I put into a discussion of this train of thought, that a value system shift needs to occur. I think that's one of the most important things that I need to include about this sort of thing. Alright? Because when people are hearing about this sort of thing, they view the current value system existing within this new kind of world. And what they're seeing is the end results of what would happen if you put a baby, or if you put a toddler in charge of air traffic control. That's what they're imagining. They're imagining a train wreck. No wonder these people assume, oh, God, that will never work. Because what they're envisioning is a toddler at the controls of air traffic control. So it's the value system shift, away from self-interest, away from, the idea of separation of one human being to another, because, we're both human beings, we're both members of a social species that is interconnected through time. If you trace all of our lineages back far enough, we all have a common ancestor. We are all related on the fundamental level. Take that, and anti-incest people. Anti-incest people. Who are these anti-incest people? Never mind. Bad joke. But yeah, so these people, when you describe to them, the brilliant things that technology can do, they're envisioning, Joe Bloggs from down the road living in that kind of system. Joe Bloggs from down the road, who, by the way, doesn't have a job, leeches off the state, sits indoors all day watching TV and scratching his balls and smoking fags. That's what they're envisioning, and they're envisioning, you want to give him more free time, and you want to give him more TV and more fags, and and that it's really weird. Because this is why we need to use non-violent communication to see where people are coming from, see what people are actually envisioning, because their current frame of reference is the dominant value systems of today, which, by the way, is like, greed and self-interest and hostility, all that stuff that comprises the current zeitgeist. I mean, I've done a multi-part discussion about this with a couple of years ago, back with Ben McLeish. We did like two-parter shows, so 4 parts altogether. First 2 parts were what comprises the current zeitgeist, and second part is what comprises an RBE zeitgeist, I think I called it. But I've gone through all that sort of thing. All the things that comprise the current system, that's their frame of reference. And the frame of reference we're talking about with a resource-based economy is one very, very removed from it, because it's very evolved. It's a bit like comparing our current culture with the culture of say 4,000 years ago. It's going to be very different, and social change is accelerating. Everything has to be accelerating in order to keep in time, or at least in trend analysis, with other trends that are accelerating as well. For example, the technological invention, that technology evolves exponentially. I mean, this is another thing that I tried to explain to them as well. It was one of the things I described at the beginning to describe how technology is making things better, and I was trying to describe exponential growth to them. But yeah, it sort of like devolved there, and it got to the point where the guy just said, "Well, you're just a silly man," and I'm just like, "Silly man, sir? Really? Why do you have to say that? Why did I was trying to understand where he was coming from. Trying to get something from him to show me, like, because I think by then I was trying to see, okay, this isn't going to be resolved by using reason, so I need to know why he's doing what he's doing, so I can work from there instead and work backwards. Because I mean, I knew that there was some time, but I knew that there wasn't a hell of a lot of time. But I was just like, why do you need to call me a silly man? So he said, so what, should I call you a silly woman? And I'm just like, well, how about no value judgments? How about no insults? How about no projections? Maybe we can make the world a better place if we stop doing that. And at that point, everyone in the carriage was silent and couldn't really say anything. So I mean, maybe this was a little emotional reaction on my part, but when I noticed that no one was going to say anything, I just said, "I rest my case," and walked back to where I was sitting. So yeah, that was the exchange that I had. One thing that probably would have made it a little bit better and maybe a little less sensationalized is if I'd gone back through all the different points that were raised and addressing them on that in the same way that I addressed his value judgment. I should have and turned to each of the people in turn as well. I think that would have been really effective. Like, said to him, maybe if we stop insulting each other when they present new information and trying to call them a hypocrite because they use money to buy a ticket, maybe if we stop doing that, then we could possibly make a better world. And then turn to the woman who said that social change is actually impossible. I said, maybe if we stop rejecting and dismissing the idea of social change, maybe social change would actually be possible. And I turned to the chick who is concerned about motivation, and I say to her, maybe if we consider that money does not actually provide the kind of true healthy motivation that intrinsic motivation does, maybe we'd be able to make the world a better place. Maybe if we stopped thinking that money is just the way it is, turn to the one that said this is just the way it is, maybe if we stopped thinking that this is just the way it is, maybe it would actually change. But yeah, I could have really closed it off really simply with that, but obviously it was by that point I was so it was like it was coming up to I think it was coming up to 1 a.m. by then, and I was really tired, and they were incredibly belligerent. So I was, I'd be lying to say if I said that I wasn't emotionally affected negatively by the experience, and thus was trying to call upon my faculties of reason to circumnavigate my emotional reactions. Just say, look, we just need to reason. People do respond to reason, right? That's the assumption that I tend to go on a lot of the time, because I try to be as reasonable as reasonable a person as I possibly can, and a lot of the times I assume that other people are at least similarly inclined, which I find to my dismay is actually not the case for a lot of people. But yeah, it's something that I really need to look into, and I've gone through a 9-hour training program for non-violent communication, and it's really given me reason to completely rethink how I communicate as an activist, because as I said earlier, you're not just communicating about things in general, you're communicating something that by itself has a defensive reaction on behalf of people that you communicate it to. People identify themselves with the current system, and as a result, when you criticize the system, they think you're criticizing them as well. This is why they were reacting so emotionally and irrationally and fervently, because they thought I was personally attacking them. But in fact, I was just criticizing a system of so-called economics. That's another thing. The girl that started it off, she used the term economics a few times, to which I had to ask her, what do you mean by economics? Do you mean like what the market system does, or do you mean what economics actually means? And as far as she was concerned, what the market does is economics. I'll tell you what, I wished I'd got round to talking about about what the system itself actually does. Because if I'd used my whole cancer analogy that I use for describing the mathematical unsustainability of infinite growth on a finite planet, if I'd gone through and explained that and made sure that it had got through, well, not made sure that it had got through, but ensured that I'd effectively communicated it to all of them, and like at least tried to hold them to like providing a response to it, one that isn't an emotional or irrational one, I think that conversation could have gone a lot better. Because I normally find when I say something like that, their normal response is, all right, well, what do you propose then? Even when I have actually been explaining exactly what I propose for the last 10 minutes. See, I noticed a lot of people, they shut down when approaching this kind of thing. I'm surprised that as many people spoke up in that train carriage as they did. And whenever anyone spoke up, it was only to reinforce what the other people were saying, to give another excuse for fatalistic thinking. One of them said, "Oh, it's just the way it is." Another one said that social change is impossible. Another one said that money has to be there to motivate us. Another one said that if you want to discuss social change, then you can't use money for anything. And if you have got something, then it must mean you have rich parents. There was all these different attacks that were coming in, and because at first I think they were trying to find out what it actually was, but the more information I gave, the more it seemed to threaten their worldview. It was it was interesting to see. I wish I got a recording of it. I had my IC recorder on me. I could have just easily pressed record and just kept it there, just to record for my own edification later on. Because there's probably quite a few things that they said that I'd forgotten that were important that would be important to remember. Because it would be pivotal in me actually understanding exactly where they were coming from. Maybe they were saying something over me that I didn't hear because I was trying to halfway through a sentence. It's difficult when you get situations like that. But yeah, it's something to learn from, and it wasn't just all them. I did fail to. It was mainly, the failures were mainly on their part to understand what I was saying, and the failures on my part were my inability to always use non-violent communication. And not explaining things as concisely as I'd hoped. And some of the phrasings that I used, it got their backs up, because they found little excuses to say, oh yeah, he's saying something about me there, even though when I was talking about jobs and stuff like that. But anyway, I've rabbited on enough about that sort of thing. So just to wrap up the podcast now, I see that conversation as something that both worked and didn't work. What did work, I'm going to do more of, and what didn't work, I'm going to do as little of as possible. But yeah, it's all a learning experience, It's, some of these people you're not going to get through to, but sometimes there are other people in earshot that are open to it, but they're just quietly listening, and they're quietly taking in the information. They're just overhearing it. No one knows they're overhearing it. No one needs to know they're overhearing it. They're just sat there. They're thinking about things, and a conversation crops up near them, and they take in the information. Maybe they're open to it. Maybe a couple of people have Googled the Zeitgeist Movement and the Venus Project and the resource-based economy as a result of my communication. You know, whether or not they paid attention all the way along and, you know, thought that the people who were providing the irrational answers were more persuasive, purely because the arguments they were using didn't need much thinking, and they're used a lot in the current because the current culture embraces a lot of irrational thinking, because irrational thinking, you know, it doesn't threaten the current system, so it's safe language. You know, language that doesn't promote thinking is safe language in the monetary system. You know, thus it's, you know, it's promoted more, and thus it's more dominant. So people would in that kind of culture would naturally just assume that if someone used that kind of irrational logic, which by the way is a bit of an oxymoron, irrational logic, in a sense. If you live in a culture where, you know, if someone's having a debate and suddenly someone calls someone a name, it's like, oh, that's a wicked burn, man. You know, would you like some Savlon for that burn? People see that as a victory. If they've personally insulted someone, that is seen as a victory, because, oh yeah, he's got you there, when in fact what they're saying doesn't actually have any explanatory power itself. If you don't think about it for more than 5 seconds, then someone asking, have you got a ticket, if the person is promoting a world without the need for money, if you don't think about it for more than 5 seconds, then, oh yeah, he's talking about a world without the need for money, but he used money to buy the ticket. Ah, what a hypocrite. If you cut off all thinking at that point, which is what most people are encouraged to do, then yes, that kind of attack seems effective, but it doesn't address the point at hand. So we need to address the point at hand. But that's that. I've wasted enough time talking about methods that don't work anymore. We need to talk about things that do work. Okay, so have a look into non-violent communication. It's something that, you know, it's something that is really going to change the way that I talk to people, and also consider things about life itself, because it's not just a communicative tool, it's also, dare I say, a spiritual kind of approach. But you know, you'll find out when you look into it. But that's my podcast. If you want to support this podcast by getting more brilliant content, and maybe even some of the people on my triad of sponsorship, then do whatever you got to do to thank both all of Russell Brand, Caroline Lucas, and Sir Patrick Stewart. Thank them for sponsoring this show. And the more of us that thank them, the more likely they will be to come on to talk to us. But yeah, this podcast was brought to you by Chip Itch, the cream that soothes the itching, which is the reprimand for critical thinking this current society. Because don't you have an RFID chip in your arm as well? Is it just me? I don't know. Either way, Chip Itch is selling like by the boatload. Alright? But anyway, there's that. So go to www.chipitch.com/offer, type in the code name Sheep No More, all one word, and you'll get a lifetime supply for just half the price. But that's my podcast. Hopefully in a future show, I'm hoping to get Adam Kokesh on for, I think maybe, because I think he does his interviews in 15-minute segments, so hopefully I can have about 15 minutes with Adam. It'll be a brilliant discussion what me and him could have. So I'm just hoping that we get on such a roll that we lose a little bit of track of time, and we got half an hour, and but it's cool because he still has loads of spare time left. But anyway, there's that. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. I don't know what else I need to say about this topic. I think I've probably said all that I can say without massively repeating myself. If any of the people that were involved in this discussion is listening to this podcast, thank you for the insights and communications that you've given me. I've tried to see what's alive in you, and how to try and meet your needs that you've communicated to me by asking me questions, by even providing the insults that you have. It's enable me to find out where you're coming from, basically, and how to ultimately express my love for you by, providing the positive insights that I've accumulated in my life, and while recognizing that the world is a very dysfunctional and very scary place at times, if we work together and if we apply the right kind of compassion, the right kind of sustainable approaches, develop the right kinds of values, and the right kind of motivation, then we really can make this world a better place. And debates on the train like I had on Saturday will no longer need to occur in the form that they currently did, and the direction that they took. I'm sincerely hopeful that we will one day have a future where this kind of thing is it's just not an issue anymore. That's really why I'm doing it, so that the world can be better. So with that bombshell, I will leave you to your thoughts, and thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. So take care.